So you want to learn a language by speaking with native speakers, but you live in an area where there's none around. So what do? Let's talk about a handful of strategies that you can use to practice speaking a foreign language with native speakers without actually having to leave the country you live in. And with each of these strategies, I'm going to give you a couple different resources that you can use to accomplish them. Oh, and also a side note, if you're interested in any of the resources that I mentioned today, you can go to links below in the description box, and I'll have links to all of my reviews of all of them so you can get details on what each of them do well and what each of them don't do so well. So let's get into it. Now, the most obvious and the most free and the most common strategy for doing this is language exchanges. So if you're not really sure what a language exchange is, it's basically where you find somebody who is learning your native language and they speak your target language natively, and you have conversations where you exchange languages. Even if you live in a place where there are a lot of native speakers, this is generally what you'll do. But it's like hanging out with somebody for the purpose of exchanging languages and learning each other's languages better. I'm going to mention 3 resources for language exchanges. The first one is HelloTalk. It looks a little bit like this. It's a free language learning app, and you basically you have conversations with people, or people send you messages or you send them messages, and you have conversations back and forth in whatever language. And that's basically it. It can be really overwhelming, and don't quote me on this because I don't know, but I've seen on the internet, HelloTalk is a China-based company, which means there is talk about, censoring information that they don't want to be talked about. I'm not confirming or denying. I don't know. I'm just saying this is what I see on the internet. I don't personally use this app for myself because as a female presenting human, when I go onto apps like these, I get a whole lot of messages. I don't know if you can tell. I get a whole lot of messages from like random guys who really want to talk to me. They don't want to talk to me for the purposes of a language exchange. Let's just leave it at that. But regardless, there are a lot of people who do like HelloTalk. And if you don't like HelloTalk, the other recommendation I have for you is Tandem. Tandem is also very similar to HelloTalk. It's almost exactly the same, actually. The first tab is the community, and it looks like just a bunch of people who speak Spanish natively and are learning English. And so, theoretically, you go and click on any one of these people and you start a conversation, and that's how it goes. Strangely, do you see how this one is like, it looks like Pinterest almost? It's kind of weird. Regardless, you can use Tandem to select any one of these people and start a conversation with them. Maybe it'll turn into a really great friendship, really great relationship. Maybe it won't. It really depends. It can be really overwhelming for me personally to get a whole bunch of different texts, and they don't, nothing really comes of them. So that is something to be aware of. And I believe, looking at this, Tandem does offer the option of showing only a certain gender. So that's why they're all women. So you go into the filters. If you can see that, you go into the filters and you can see that I've selected only female and within certain age range, which is really helpful so that you're not talking to men if you don't want to. And like I said, I don't tend to use language exchange apps, but when I do, or if I do, I definitely prefer Tandem over HelloTalk, just my own personal opinion. And the third language exchange app that I want to mention is Lingbe. This is what Lingbe looks like. It's a lot different from HelloTalk and Tandem, because HelloTalk and Tandem are primarily text-based. You can have phone conversations, you can have video chats with them, you can have voice chats, you can correct each other's vocabulary and sentence and grammars and things like that. But Lingbe is primarily video chat based. So it's primarily you pick up the phone and you find somebody who speaks your target language natively and you have a face-to-face conversation, which is really interesting. And pros and cons. Some people prefer the face-to-face conversation, some people don't. I will have to say, I just recently updated my review of Lingbe on my website, and I do have to say that even though I pressed this call feature and tried to call somebody, it just kept ringing and ringing and ringing, which, I used it to find a native Spanish speaker who wanted to practice English or Spanish or whatever, and that was really difficult to find, as in I couldn't find it. So take that as you will. There's no way to see if it's because people aren't online or if it's just not popular or whatever it is. But nonetheless, Lingbe is an opportunity for you to find free language exchanges to speak with native speakers if there are none around you physically. Now, my next recommendation for how to learn a language with native speakers, even if there are none around you, is a strategy called shadowing. Shadowing is really, really simple, very basic. Shadowing is basically the idea of you are listening to an audio and you are repeating the audio. So it's not going to be a conversation like a language exchange will be. It's just kind of listening to sentences, words, phrases. It really depends on what you're doing and repeating it until your mouth gets used to the muscle memory. It starts to get easier for you. You start to be able to use the words, which is something that you can accomplish with consistency doing it if it's a strategy that you would prefer to use. Audio. Can you hear those birds? Sorry if you can. Now, generally with shadowing, people find audio clips that they like to hear, or music, or, audiobooks, things like that, where they can just listen to an audio and say it themselves. So it's not really app-based necessarily, but there are definitely resources that the way that they teach languages is essentially shadowing, like Mango Languages for one. They definitely play you an audio and lead you to repeat the audio and say the audio and guess what the audio is, so that you practice with that muscle control and you practice saying those words in your mouth. And while it's not necessarily shadowing by its definition, if you use something like lyrics training or even just music in general, where you're reading the lyrics and singing along like karaoke style to a song, that can be some kind of shadowing. It's not exactly the same idea, but you get the point. And it's definitely better than nothing. Now, my next tip for practicing learning a language with native speakers, even if they're not around, are language tutors. And you can find those online. There are a few really popular sites I'm going to share with you in this video. The first one, the most popular one, is called italki. Basically, italki is an online platform where language teachers will go onto italki and advertise their classes for you to find. So all you gotta do is you go on italki and, for example, I already had an account, so it already says Spanish teachers for you, and it's got a whole bunch of, for example, these are teachers that I've used in the past, and you can go into any one of them and open up their profile. You can see all sorts of information that they share, lots of reviews and all that. You can find their schedule, and you can find, how much they charge and whatnot. It's, when people online talk about finding language tutors, the one they'll talk about is italki. A lot of times they'll talk about it because italki makes it very easy for online creators like myself to make money, because all you do is, if you use an affiliate link, then, the creator gets $10 in italki credits. So that's why you'll see a lot of people talking about italki. Whether or not it's better, honestly, it probably is better, especially for learners of not so common languages, because there are so many people on italki, so many teachers. If you are learning a less commonly learned languages, it's going to be much easier to find them on italki than the other two resources I'm going to mention in a second, because, the smaller the app, the less popular the app, the less likely that a native speaker or a tutor of a less commonly learned language is going to be on that platform. So that said, italki is probably going to be your first bet if you are looking for language tutors for the first time. Now, if you do want to keep yourself open to finding another tutor on a different platform, there are two other really common ones. The second one, the first other one, so the second platform, is called Verbling. So this is Verbling. It looks pretty similar, right? It's just a collection of teachers who are teaching Spanish, and you can see their hourly rate. You can see they all have a little bio on them. And very similar to italki, Verbling has a little bio for all these teachers. You have all things that any particular teacher is good at, and all sorts of stuff like that, all sorts of information. Like I said, italki and Verbling are pretty similar. It really boils down to the teachers that are on each individual platform, because they are so similar. And if that changes, remember, link below in the description, I do have a blog post that combines italki and Verbling, just because blog posts I can edit, YouTube videos I cannot. So if there is something that I'm saying that's out of date in this video, it shouldn't be out of date in the blog post in the description below. And the last platform that I'm going to mention in this video for finding a language tutor is Preply. I'm not actually sure how you pronounce it. This one, I've seen a few more people talking about it online. I personally do not use it because, as you can see, if you go down to my review, I do not agree with their payment structures. There's a whole thing, but basically, the first lesson that you have with a teacher on this platform, they do not earn any money, and you have to commit a long time, 200 hours or something like that before they get the majority of your payments to them, and everything else goes to the platform. So in my personal, ethics, morality, I don't agree with that. And so I don't use Preply. I'm not sure which pronunciation is correct, but it is an option if you want to use it. And very similar to italki and Verbling, you have a list of teachers who are teaching the language that you want to learn. There's a few settings up here to narrow down, price, where they were born, availability, specialties, things like that. Very, very similar to the other two platforms. It's just a matter of personal preference. And if you have tried a lot of tutors on one particular platform and you haven't found one that you really like, these are other options that you can use to find language teachers who speak your target language natively. Now, my next option for accomplishing all of this without native speakers physically around you is the idea of recording yourself saying words and having a native speaker correct your pronunciation, correct your vocabulary, things like that. There are a couple of options for this. So if this is something that intrigues you and it takes the pressure off like it does for me, then I have two recommendations for this. The first one is the best for this particular strategy, and that is Yask. Yask is really excellent at this. You can see here you have a bunch of people who are practicing saying, in this example, Spanish or English. These are all Spanish speakers and they are practicing their English pronunciation. And so they are, posting their pronunciations for me, a native English speaker, to correct and let them know if their pronunciation is good or if there's something that can be improved, and I can let them know. Same goes for me in Spanish. I can just literally press this button, and then it gives me a bunch of exercise. And then, for example, I can read that out loud and it'll submit to a bunch of native Spanish speakers and they can correct my pronunciation or any number of things. So that's really helpful. I am personally a huge fan of Yask. In fact, if you go into my blog post review in the description box, I have an exclusive discount for you. So if you are interested in trying out Yask for yourself, I do highly recommend that. Now, Yask is a very small business. The other option that I have for this particular strategy is Busuu. Busuu is not a small business at all. They're a huge business. They are one of the oldest language apps there is. So, fun fact, Busuu is not letting me log in. So I can't show you physically. If you go to the review in the description box below, you can find screenshots and whatnot, but this is straight up not letting me log in. But the idea is essentially the same as Yask. You send in pronunciations, you send in responses to phrases or questions, and you record yourself saying it, and it sends out to the Busuu community, and then you can add back and forth with that. And finally, I actually have a bonus recommendation for you. Now, this isn't live yet. However, I did get an email this morning from Polygloss. They are working on something like this, so maybe by the time you're watching this video, it is active on the Polygloss app. Make sure you keep track of Polygloss if you want to be in the know for that. But basically, the way that Polygloss works is you start a match, and you have matches with other language learners where you select one of these images and you describe the image, you ask a question about the image, you make a statement about the image, basically whatever it is that you want to say, and then it matches you up with somebody who is also learning your target language, and then they have to guess which picture that you were describing. And then in return, you do the same. They describe the image and you have to guess to see which image they have described. Just this morning, I received an email from Polygloss saying that they are working on adding recording to it and basically saying the words instead of having to write them. This isn't current yet. This is a little, maybe I should be talking about this in this video, but it is what it is. If and when they have this update to the Polygloss app, it's another option that you can use for this. It's definitely an option to, work with people who speak your target language natively, and they can correct your sentences and the things that you say. So that is it on how to learn a language with native speakers, even if there are none around. We're fortunate to live in a world where the internet is everywhere. And so when there's internet everywhere, you have access to native speakers everywhere. You just gotta be a little creative and you just gotta know what to look for. Now, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when I post a new YouTube video every Wednesday. And if you found this information valuable and you'd like some more, go to the link below in the description description and take my free quiz, where based on your responses to the quiz, I will send you a personalized recommendations for what to do next in your language learning. It's totally free and it'll point you right to the YouTube video that you need right now in your language learning. I'll see you there.